Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're in Mark's Gospel. We've come to verse 21, and Jesus has been taken from the Praetorium barracks at the fortress of Antonia outside the city to be crucified at the hill called Golgotha, the place of the skull, which has never been really identified. The ground surrounding Jerusalem has been dug and altered so many times over the centuries that it's probably impossible to identify it today. It may not even exist today. But before we get to those verses, which we'll pick up with tomorrow, I wanted to spend some time today to talk about crucifixion itself as a means of execution. Crucifixion is a means of execution that is designed to be as brutal, merciless, awful as possible. And it's kind of hard to imagine something that could be worse. I'm sure we can think of things that might be as bad that have been done to human beings. Awful things that were done to our servicemen in the Second World War, in the Philippines, and in Southeast Asia when they became prisoners of war, and that would equal what was done to, but not that surpasses. I mean, this is engineered to be as awful as we can imagine it. So crucifixion was forbidden for Roman citizens. That's why Paul was not crucified but beheaded. Quick, clean, and it's done. Crucifixion was meant to last perhaps for days, depending on how badly you wanted someone to suffer. That's why the scourging part, in a sense, is a bit of mercy, because it makes sure that someone dies more quickly than if they had not been scourged. So you could be nailed or tied, because the wounds that were inflicted in nailing you to the cross, they were not the cause of death. But the evidence that we have of bones of people who have been crucified, which are not many, of course, because they were usually put in mass graves, are of people who have been nailed, not with nails but with spikes, so they would drive a spike. Let me tell you what a cross looked like in the first place. A cross was a T. It was not this. It was not this. It was this. It was a T most of the time. But the earliest depiction that we have of a cross, the earliest depictions that we have of a cross, which are about Jesus on the cross, but not from Christian sources, because Christians for many centuries would not depict Jesus. They would depict the shepherd or something, but not Jesus. They would use symbols like loaves and fishes or vine and branches, but they would not draw Jesus. But people who hated Christians would draw Jesus to ridicule Christians. In fact, the oldest depiction that we have of a cross is from about the year 200, from a piece of graffiti in Rome on the retaining wall of a villa, evidently owned by a Christian, or where a Christian lived, resided, maybe as a member of the family or a member of the household, or maybe even a slave. But it's a picture of a guy with his hands like this, looking at a cross, and it says Alexamenos worships his God. Alexamenos sebete ton theon. In Greek, Alexamenos worships his God. And on this cross, the cross is a T. On this cross, there's someone being crucified, but the person has a donkey's head. Some people see a horse's head or a donkey's head. And in other words, he worships a donkey. It's really chilling to see the vitriol, the hatred that people had towards Christians at around 200 AD. Did I say BC before? I apologize. 200 AD. But we have a T cross on that. But then there's also a sign on top. It makes it look sort of like this. And that sign was the titulus. And the titulus would have been a sign stuck up there, nailed up there, that listed the offender's offenses. And of course, we know what Jesus' titulus said. It said, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And so we know what Jesus' title said. So you would have carried your cross piece, this piece right here. You would have carried your cross piece to the place where there would have been scaffolding or, up bars, up, the perpendicular pieces already in place. And then you would be pushed to the ground, and you would be laid out, stretched out again across this cross piece. And a Roman soldier would put his boot on your forearm, and they would take a spike, and right here in the divot of your palm through the back, you can feel there's a little place in the back where that spike would come out. It's a bit of an angle. If they nailed you here, that would just come through. It wouldn't bear your weight, but this bears your weight, and that's where they would nail. And then they would do it to the other arm, and then they would use ropes to raise you up, and then once they got you raised up, they would place one foot on another, and where your ankle meets your foot, nail through both feet, spike through both feet, and they'd put you there on the cross. Now, how you die on a cross is you die from asphyxiation. It's the same way you would die if you were waterboarded to death, through slow asphyxiation or strangulation, or not strangulation, but lack of oxygen. You can't breathe. What happens when you're crucified is that you hang low, and it restricts your diaphragm. And you can inhale, but you can't exhale unless you pull yourself up from your wounds, push yourself up from your wounds. And so it's really torturous. Try to inhale without exhaling, and to keep inhaling when you need more oxygen. It's awful. It's awful. And it only took a few hours for Jesus to die, and he didn't die directly from the crucifixion. He died, as we'll find out, from a cardiac issue. But at some point you got too tired, too weak to lift yourself up. And all you could do was inhale, 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 inhale. And either you died from lack of oxygen, or your lungs ceased functioning because of the inhalation that you continued to do. And any description that you have of it is absolutely grotesque. And that's what they did to Jesus. Okay, we'll get to the text next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes.